Thank you very much for the invitation and good afternoon. I have planned an introduction in English, and I hope that we can have a discussion afterwards, not only questions. That's my intention. Why discuss the teachers' resistance against Nazification of Norwegian youth and education here today? History shows that it is possible to win a specific struggle against an overwhelming military power. People can win by political means a specific struggle. And the teachers' resistance against Nazification of Norwegian youth and education is an example of just this. Therefore, it's interesting to study the policy and the organization of the teacher resistance in order to reflect on the implications for today and the future. A few words about the background. The Nazi occupation of Norway started on April the 9th, 1940. And the occupation was implemented by military and ideological means. From the very beginning, the Nazi regime took measures to win the hearts and minds of the people in support of the Nazi regime. This was done in different ways, in terms of policy guidelines, new laws, new organizations led by the Nazis, new leadership in civil organizations, and replacement of professionals who resisted the Nazi policies. The Nazi policy was, of course, backed up by force, by persecution and arrests of people resisting the occupation. Nazification was targeted at professions that played an important role in the Norwegian society: teachers, religious leaders, and the police. Here I will talk about the teachers' resistance, which was directed towards or against Nazification of the youth and teaching in schools and the teacher unions. I will also briefly relate this struggle to the struggle fought by the church and the parents, because that had a great impact on the struggle. In terms of the police, they did not resist Nazification. On the contrary, the police served the Nazi regime, and more than half, or more than 50% of them, became Nazi members of the Nazi party. Thus, I will not go into the role of the police, but only point to the fact that in sharp contrast to the teaching profession, the police profession was open to Nazification and served the Nazi regime. A few words about the context. On April 9th, 1940, a Norwegian Nazi collaborator seized power in a Nazi-backed coup d'etat. His name was Vidkun Quisling. The parliament was dissolved and the government went into exile. Nazi judges were installed in the Supreme Court. And from 1942 until 1945, Quisling served as so-called minister president in collaboration with the German Nazi occupying forces. And his regime came to be called the Quisling regime. Illegal resistance was being developed and organized as early as from September 1940 in terms of military and civil resistance. Within the resistance, high priority and strong efforts were put into the development of political guidelines for the resistance. This was done in terms of development of what we in Norway call paroler. I don't know if it's paroles in English. And the idea was that better no parole than a poor parole. In other words, very important to develop good paroles. As early as October 4th, yeah, I have to show you some pictures, I forget. Here is Vidkun Quisling, Minister President. And here you see him together with Himmler. Quisling is on the left, then comes Himmler, then comes Terboven, who was the Reichskommissar, the Hitler's representative in Norway, and then Falkenhorst, who was the military chief of the occupying forces. Terboven issued a law on October 4th, 1940, saying, "Public servants who do not with all their powers contribute to the new political order can be expelled from service." This was of course used to threaten the professions to pledge loyalty to the Nazi party. 5 teacher unions went together and wrote a response which refused loyalty to the Nazi party. Then, in 1942, the Norwegian, the Quisling regime issued 2 laws. One, which made it obligatory for all youth between 10 and 18 years of age to participate in the Nazi Youth League in support of the Nazi regime. And the other one, or the law, was directed towards the teachers, which made it mandatory or obligatory for them to become members in a Nazi teacher union. The teacher unions and the representatives of the Norwegian church immediately sent protests to the Nazi regime against the 2 laws. In a letter to the ministry on February 14th, they argued that participation in the Nazi Youth League and Norges Lærersamband was against the conviction of the parents and the teachers. And this came to be a very important clue in the organizing, in how teachers and parents were organized. There was made an appeal to the conviction of people. In other words, that there is some position which is more fundamental than the particular party or religious group you belong to. There are some more fundamental values that it is expected that each person acts on the basis on. And the appeal was made then to the conviction of the parents and the teachers. A committee was established to organize the teachers' protest against membership in Norges Lærersamband. And one person was decisive to the teachers' struggles against Nazification. That was Einar Højgaard. Højgaard was an historian. He had studied in Germany in 1935 and was very well informed about the Nazi development in Germany. In Norway, he had worked as a teacher in secondary school, and then he got a PhD scholarship in education. He thus had contacts both in ordinary public schools and at the university. And he developed 4 key political roles that became central to the teachers' resistance. And I've just translated it directly. I don't know if it's good English, but I've done it directly from Norwegian. 1, demand for membership or loyalty declaration to the National Socialist Party is refused. 2, every attempt to bring Nazi propaganda into the schools is refused. Resist every order from non-competent actors. And 4, resist any participation in the Nazi Youth League. Then something happened which I think is quite interesting, and that is that this action committee decided that each teacher should protest individually to the ministry against membership in Norges Lærersamband. In other words, it was expected that each teacher send a letter and sign it and send it to the occupying forces, telling that they would not participate. And the letter had the following text: I cannot participate in the upbringing of Norwegian youth according to the guidelines of the Nazi Youth League because it is against my conscience. Since membership in Norges Lærersamband, the Nazi teacher union, makes me obliged to contribute to such upbringing, and because membership also puts other obligations on me which are against the conditions on which I was employed, I hereby declare that I do not consider myself a member of Norges Lærersamband. Altogether, 12,000 teachers out of 14,000 teachers in Norway signed this letter and sent it to the ministry. And they did it on the one and the same date. So it became a very strong reaction. Then Hitler's Reichskommissar Terboven, or the Nazi regime, reacted by expelling teachers from their jobs, withholding salaries, and enlisting teachers to work for the Nazi regime. Teachers were enlisted to hard labor under poor conditions at military German installations in Norway. And then Reichskommissar Terboven, Hitler's representative, decided that 1,100 teachers should be arrested and sent to the north of Norway to forced labor. This was called Kirkenesferden. Kirkenes is a city in the north. And this is the ship that was used to transport the teachers, DS Skjærstad. Lists with names of the teachers to be arrested were made by Norges Lærersamband, the teacher union, the Nazi teacher union. The teachers were arrested in different parts of Norway and put into camps at Grini and Trondheim, and 498 teachers were sent by ship on April the 15th, 1943. And then on the 11th of May, a new group was a new group was sent and arrived at Kirkenes to do forced labor. In the fall of 1942, teachers who had become seriously ill in Kirkenes were offered release from arrest if they signed membership in Norges Lærersamband, together with teachers who were, or prisoners who were above 55 years of age. After discussions, the teachers decided that 160 teachers should sign the membership in Norges lærersamband in order to get released. The teachers' resistance was at its most intense between 1940 and 1942, and the result was a failure on behalf of the regime to make teachers engage in Nazi ideology promotion in the schools. In 1942, the conflict between the church and the Quisling regime was put on an edge because the Nazi regime made priests do Nazi sermons, and the bishops made a letter which was called the Shepherds, I think, Hyrdebrevet, Shepherd's letter, on March the 1st, declaring a total break with the regime. They refused, as a profession, to accept the policy of the new regime. And 800 out of 850 priests supported this letter. And the letter was read at the sermons on Sunday in church and thus reached the whole population. And this became a very strong moral support where both the teachers and the priests resisted the Nazi ideology and practice. And of course, both the Norwegian school is a national school governed by the ministry, and we had a state church. So both the professions had a relation to the government before, and both resisted the new regime. And after March the 1st, the parents' front was established. And here there were two women who took the initiative. Their names, they were sisters, Åsta and Helga Stene. Both were teachers in secondary school, and one of them had a PhD. And they were organized in Kvinneliga for Fred og Frihet, the Quaker organization organizing women. So they had a network all over the country, and this network again was related to other women's organizations in what was called the Women's Front. So Helga and Åsta Stene, through the women's organizations, organized the parents' resistance. Here you see the teachers in Kirkenes. Here is Helga Stene, and here is Åsta Stene. And they wrote one sentence: I do not want that my child shall participate in the Nazi Youth League because the guidelines are against my conscience. Again, this concept of the conscience. Again, the protests were very well organized, and 200,000 letters from the parents were sent to the ministry, resisting Nazification through this Nazi Youth League. So we can actually sum up that the two laws that were introduced in 1942 the law for the Nazi Youth League, and the law for organizing the teachers in the Nazi teacher union became a failure. The regime did not succeed in mobilizing the teachers in Nazification of youth. Why? Why? I can only suggest some points, but I'd like to hear your opinions on this, because I think this is interesting to reflect upon. As I see it, the teachers' resistance was organized around political paroles and principles, which in that situation were imperative and categorical. No collaboration with the Nazi regime was accepted. The resistance was organized around 4 key paroles, which summed up the refusal to collaborate with the Nazi regime, and the resistance appealed to the conscience of the teachers. The resistance united teachers at elementary level, secondary level, and university level. And the teachers collaborated with what was called the labor front, the parents' front, the women's front, and the church. So it was a very broad collaboration. The struggle was very well organized in the sense of discipline and timing. And the teachers were willing to pay the price when the Nazi regime started persecuting opponents. They had a strong leadership in Einar Høygaard, who played a crucial role in the struggle. He was a highly respected teacher. He was arrested while trying to escape to Sweden in 1943. He was tortured and he committed suicide, jumping out of the window under arrest at Victoria Terrasse in Oslo in 1943. He knew too much. He became 36 years old. He was a good teacher. So my question to you is really, against this background, is there something to learn from this in our context? Another situation, but what are really the implications of this small story? That's my question, which I hope we can discuss. Thank you.